What's up, guys? Welcome to the Star Wars After Show presented by Verizon. I'm Andy Gutierrez, co-host of the Star Wars Show, and because we had Doug Chang on the Star Wars Show today, we are going to be talking all about Star Wars design and concept art. Joining me today are my good friends, Justin Bolger, social engagement strategist for StarWars.com, Clay Brown, design specialist for Lucasfilm, and Lucasfilm Story Group, creative executive Matt Martin. Thanks, guys. So this week, we had Doug Chang on the show, and we talked a lot about concept art. What designs from Rogue One excite you?
Honestly, it's just in general his designs for Rogue One. I love that Doug Chang is somebody who has worked on the prequels and on the sequel trilogy right now. So it seems right that he would, and the special editions. So it seems right that he should be able to combine all of that knowledge and artistry for Rogue One, which is kind of at the nexus of all of this stuff. So it's less about any one particular piece of art for me, and more about the fact that it's Doug Chang using all of his experience to create new stuff in that time frame.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting with Doug because on the story side we have Dave Filoni, who was kind of George's protege. In a lot of ways, Doug is that on the design side, where he worked with George for many years developing Star Wars, so now instinctually he's going to know what George would have approved, which is really cool.
What sort of design elements do you guys think are necessary for a Star Wars concept or Star Wars design to actually look Star Wars?
I think what's interesting about Rogue One is that it's fun to see new things that are just like immediately iconic. Like you see the Death Troopers and you're like, oh, cool, like a black stormtrooper. We've never seen that before, but immediately it fits within like the universe and just across the board. You see like stormtroopers on the beach, walking through the ocean and the water with palm trees. We've never seen that before, but again, it fits so well within the whole universe. And so it makes sense. And I think it takes somebody like Doug, who has studied Ralph and has worked with George for so many years, to really just like put that into play and know what will work.
You hit the nail on the head when you said it makes sense. That to me is great Star Wars design, is that it makes sense. It would be really easy in Star Wars to come up with something that looks fantastical just to look fantastical. But the best Star Wars design looks like it could be realer. It has a sense of verisimilitude to it, so that you're looking at this and it looks like it serves a purpose and it looks like it has a reason for existing aside from the fact that it looks cool.
What I love is that for Rogue, they went back to the 70s mindset of creating these designs. It wasn't like creating modern day designs. It's like, what would it have been like to design in the 70s? What reference points would we have had back then? And they applied those ideas to the new stuff in Rogue. That way it fit with all of the old stuff from the originals.
And that happens in Rebels a lot too.
Yeah.
I mean, since we're operating in the same time frame here, there's a lot of crossover.
I know that for Rebels, I mean, they're vigilant in making sure that they stay true to Ralph McQuarrie's artwork. And so almost everything, all the inspiration comes from like early McQuarrie drawings that again remain so iconic and classic. And you look at it and then they say, let's repurpose it. And so we've seen on Rebels new creatures and new planets that legitimately are pulled from McQuarrie drawings.
Seeing these concepts that Ralph created 40 years ago pop up, you know, in new stuff today, I mean, there's a treasure trove of concept and design that we can draw from. Do you have any favorite past elements that have shown up recently?
The protocol droid that you see in Rebels is kind of a background protocol droid, but it's used frequently. That is actually from Ralph's Droids in the Desert, his 3PO concept. And it's so cool because that piece of art was the very first finished piece of art, like fully colored, painted piece of art for Star Wars, and then we see that version of the droid taken and used in Rebels. It's really cool.
I mean, even the fact that R2 was originally supposed to have arms, and then we've seen that with Chopper in Rebels, that he has arms, and it just makes him so much more expressive and really adds to his character, which is, you know, already such a fun personality.
There's a great scene in Clone Wars which takes place on Coruscant, which is my favorite Star Wars planet. And there's a Ralph McQuarrie piece of art that has a Coruscant plaza with these weird kind of pyramidal shapes that have gaps in between them and light shining through. And to see that when they went a little bit deeper into Coruscant in the Clone Wars is really cool for me. That's I think my favorite one that I've seen.
I'm such a sucker for the cityscapes, like Ralph's old cityscapes. Do you guys have a favorite type of concept?
My favorite environment is easily Cloud City. And just like the cityscape that's already in the sky floating above Bespin. I'm ready to go there. Whenever we can get tickets, guys, just put me down.
Totally.
Everything Ralph does with ships and the textures that he uses with ships, you know, regardless of, you know, if it's in space or if it's in a planet environment, like I it's one of my favorite things to look at. I mean, I have tattoos of Ralph's ships, so obviously that's something that means a lot to me.
I like there's the concept art of the 2 Death Stars that are floating above a planet. In the honorable ones in Star Wars Rebels, when they come out of hyperspace and they see what's left of the Death Star's construction, it reminds me of that in a really, really visceral way that was so cool to me to see them come out. It's like, oh, that's where they were building the Death Star, and I see what you did.
Another cool thing that Doug mentioned, and I don't think he's ever said it anywhere else before, was that they went through 781 different concepts for the U-Wing before they settled on the final design.
Well, I know for the U-Wing, they literally just sketched out silhouettes, essentially, and they just did tons and tons and tons of silhouettes of the U-Wing, and really seeing just these super, super simple, like, vague shapes, because when it comes to Star Wars ships, the silhouette is everything. Really, Star Wars design in general, like, you need to be able to tell what it is just by looking at the silhouette.
Yeah, what struck me about that part in the interview, which was fantastic, is how positively critical they are when they're making Star Wars. It's one thing to draw a concept and say, oh, that's not going to work, and then move it aside, but to really get into the why of why it's going to work or why it's not going to work shows you the care that they put into making Star Wars. And to have that little bit of insight from the interview was really cool to me to see. It, you know, online, especially on social media all day, you see people saying, I like this about Star Wars, or I don't like this about Star Wars, and it's a black and white yes or no. But there's so much work that goes into the smallest elements of everything you see on a screen that it's, to me, it's almost impossible to say, oh, I hate this and I love this either way, because of how much work goes into it. And getting into the history of why Star Wars looks the way that it does is really, really cool.
I think there's also something to be said for just having the instinct to know, like, you know, looking at 700 plus designs saying, like, again, this works, this doesn't. And I'm reminded of, I believe it was Captain Phasma's design that was one of the options for Kylo Ren. And that was pulled out and it was like, this isn't Kylo Ren, but we're definitely using this as something because it's amazing. And so kind of like walking through and being like, that fits in Star Wars, that fits in the world, this doesn't, you know.
I think it's just really fantastic, and we've gone over this before, but like over the entire span of Star Wars, they've developed all of these ideas, and there's so many good ideas that you can't use that nothing goes to waste.
One thing that's so striking about Star Wars is having like the contrasting colors. You have the Empire that's so like black and white and gray and sterile, and then you have the Rebellion that's a lot of like greens and browns and earth tones, and then you just have these iconic scenes where it's like, you know, a red and blue lightsaber crossing, or like an orange light silhouetting Darth Vader, or just like colors. I think George was such a fan, and everybody that worked on Star Wars, they knew how to use color and light in the right way.
A great example of that is stuff you probably see all the time, which is Chris Foy's lighting concepts. The lighting concepts that he does for Rebels, like, to see how they think out the lighting of those moments is just, it's mind-blowing.
Rebels concept art is gorgeous. The lighting concept for when the AT-ATs were going through that dust storm, gorgeous stuff.
What I love about those things is that the art itself is so kind of impressionistic. It makes it more like a piece of art that I want to put on my wall.
There's something about it being unfinished too that I think makes it feel more iconic. There's a shot from the end of season 1 of Rebels when the Inquisitor is riding in like an Imperial gunship, and there's an explosion behind him. And so it's a piece of concept art that we've used on social recently, and looking at the image, it looks so basic, but something about the color in it and just the archetype of this evil person on his way to do something and the explosion happening behind him, this calm, kind of serene look on his face. You don't need dialogue, you don't need music. You can look at it and instantly you know exactly like what's going on. And it goes back to George Lucas being a fan of silent movies a lot, and understanding that you have to capture a look like that when you're telling a story like this in order to convey the entirety of the feeling to an audience. I really, really like that.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today, guys. Thanks for coming by and talking art with me. It was a lot of fun. And thanks to all of you guys for watching the Star Wars After Show presented by Verizon. I'll be back next week with another brand new episode. But if you need more Star Wars show in the meantime, head over to youtube.com/Star Wars or starwars.com. Thanks again, and may the Force be with you.